A honeymoon to remember. The wedding day had been nothing short of a dream. Sarah floated through it on a cloud of bliss, surrounded by friends, family, and the man she had chosen to spend her life with. David was everything she had ever wanted in a partner, kind, thoughtful, and deeply in love with her. As they danced their first dance under twinkling fairy lights, Sarah felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The ceremony had been followed by a reception that lasted well in the night, filled with laughter, tears, and promises of a beautiful future. Sarah's cheeks ached from smiling so much, and as they finally retreated to their suite, she looked forward to their upcoming honeymoon, a week of uninterrupted time with David, exploring the pristine beaches and lush landscapes of the Caribbean. However, as Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, nestled in David's arm neatly, she had no idea that their honeymoon would not go exactly as planned. The morning after the wedding, the apartment was unusually quiet. Sarah woke early, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, illuminating the room in a soft golden hue. The previous day's events played to me through her mind like a beloved movie. David's vows, their first kiss as husband and wife, the joy on everyone's faces. It all seemed too perfect to be real. Excited for the adventure ahead, Sarah slipped out of bed, careful not to wake David, and padded to the kitchen to start a pot of coffee. As the aroma filled the air, she began to mentally run through their travel plans. They were set to leave for the airport in just a few hours, and she couldn't wait to feel the warm sand beneath her feet, to sip cocktails by the ocean, and to enjoy every moment of this special time with David. But when she walked into the living room, her heart skipped a beat. Standing in the middle of the room, suitcase in hand, was Margaret, David's mother. Margaret was dressed in a chic travel outfit, complete with a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses perched atop her perfectly styled hair. She looked every bit the seasoned traveler, except for one glaring detail. She wasn't supposed to be traveling with them. "Good morning, darling," Margaret's voice rang out cheerfully, snapping Sarah out of her shock. "I'm all packed and ready to go." Sarah blinked, trying to make sense of the scene before her. Surely she was still dreaming, but as she looked around, it was clear that this was no dream. This was reality. "Ready to go where?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice laced with confusion and a hint of dread. "Why, the honeymoon, of course," Margaret responded as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." A wave of disbelief washed over Sarah. She had known from the beginning that marrying David meant accepting his close relationship with his mother. Margaret had always been deeply involved in David's life, offering unsolicited advice, showing up unannounced, and generally making her presence felt in every aspect of their relationship. But Sarah had never imagined that Margaret's need to be included would extend to their honeymoon. Before Sarah could formulate a response, David entered the room, still groggy from sleep. His tousled hair and wrinkled pajamas stood in stark contrast to Margaret's polished appearance. When he saw his mother standing there with her suitcase, his eyes widened in shock, and he quickly glanced at Sarah, his expression a mix of embarrassment and helplessness. "Mom," David began slowly, trying to choose his words carefully. "What are you doing with your suitcase?" Margaret's smile didn't falter. "Oh, David, don't be silly. I'm coming with you, of course. I've already cleared my schedule for the week." David's mouth opened, then closed, as if he couldn't quite find the right words. He looked at Sarah again, his eyes pleading for understanding. Mom, we've talked about this, David finally said, his voice firm but gentle. The honeymoon is just for Sarah and me. It's our time to be alone together, to celebrate our marriage. Margaret waved a dismissive hand and as if brushing away an inconsequential detail. Oh, nonsense. We've always done everything together, David. I don't see why this should be any different. Besides, I could use a little vacation myself. And who better to spend it with than my son and his lovely new wife? Sarah felt a pang of anxiety twist in her stomach. She had been looking forward to this honeymoon for months, imagining lazy days on the beach, romantic dinners under the stars, and the opportunity to bond with David without any distractions. The thought of sharing those precious moments with her mother-in-law was more than she could bear. She knew that Margaret had trouble letting go of her son, but this was a step too far. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She didn't want to hurt Margaret's feelings, but she also knew that this was a boundary that needed to be set. Margaret, Sarah began, keeping her voice as gentle as possible. We really appreciate everything you've done for us, but this is our honeymoon. We need this time to start our life together as husband and wife. Margaret's smile faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly recovered, her expression one of determination. Oh, I won't be in the way, I promise. I'll have my own room, and you two can have all the privacy you need. I'll just be nearby, in case you need anything. Sarah's heart sank. She could see that Margaret genuinely believed she was helping. But the idea of having her mother-in-law along on their honeymoon was something Sarah just couldn't accept. She glanced at David, hoping he would step in. David hesitated, his eyes darting between Sarah and his mother. It was clear that he was torn. He loved his mother dearly. She had been his rock through many difficult times. But he also knew that this was supposed to be a special time for him and Sarah, a time to bond as a couple without any outside interference. Finally, David stepped forward, taking Sarah's hand in his. The warmth of his touch gave her a sense of reassurance. He turned to his mother, his expression softening, but his resolve clear. Mom, no, David said, his voice steady. This is our honeymoon, and we need this time alone. You can't come with us. Margaret's eyes widened in surprise, as if the thought of being excluded had never even crossed her mind. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at David with a wounded expression that tugged at his heart. But David, I thought. Margaret's voice trailed off, her usual confidence giving way to vulnerability. David squeezed Sarah's hand, drawing strength from her presence. Mom, I love you, but I need you to understand that Sarah is my wife now. We need to start our life together, just the two of us. Please respect that. The room fell into a tense silence. Margaret's eyes flicked between her son and Sarah, her face a mixture of hurt, confusion, and resignation. It was clear that she hadn't anticipated this response, and for a moment, Sarah feared that the situation would escalate into a confrontation. But instead, Margaret sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping as the weight of the situation sank in. She looked at David with a sad smile, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. Well, Margaret said quietly, I suppose I can stay behind, but I just want you to know that I'll be thinking of you every minute. A wave of relief washed over Sarah. She hadn't wanted to hurt Margaret's feelings, but she also knew that this was an important moment for her and David to assert their boundaries. The honeymoon was a time for them to celebrate their love and lay the foundation for their future together. Thank you, Margaret, Sarah said softly, offering her a warm smile. We'll make sure to send you lots of pictures. David stepped forward, wrapping his mother in a gentle hug. I promise we'll spend some time together when we get back, Mom. But right now, this is something Sarah and I need. Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I understand, David. You're right. I love you both so much, and I want to be a part of everything. But I see now that I need to give you your space. As the tension in the room began to ease, Margaret slowly backed away, her suitcase still clutched in her hand. She turned to leave, but before she did, she paused at the doorway, looking back at Sarah and David with a wistful smile. I hope you have the most wonderful honeymoon, Margaret said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. You deserve it. With that, Margaret left the apartment, closing the door softly behind her. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions, but it was also filled with a sense of resolution. Sarah turned to David, her heart swelling with gratitude for how he had handled the situation. Thank you, Sarah whispered, resting her head against his chest. I know that wasn't easy. David kissed the pretty kick in the top of her head, wrapping his arms around her. You're my wife, Sarah. You come first. Always. They stood there for a moment, holding each other, before David gently pulled away and smiled down at her. Are you ready for our honeymoon? He asked, his voice light and teasing. Sarah grinned, her excitement bubbling back to the surface. More than ever. The trip to the airport was uneventful, but for Sarah, it felt like the beginning of a grand adventure. She and David were finally on their way, just the two of them, and nothing could even dampen her spirits. As the plane soared above the cloud, Sarah gazed out of the window, watching the world below shrink into a patchwork of green and blue. David reached over, intertwining his fingers with hers, and she felt a sense of peace wash over her. They arrived in the Caribbean, to a warm tropical breeze and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The resort was everything they had imagined, luxurious, secluded, and breathtakingly beautiful. Their villa overlooked the ocean, with a private terrace that offered stunning views of the sunset. For the first few days, Sarah and David lost themselves in the rhythm of island life. They spent lazy mornings in bed, savoring the quiet moments together. Afternoons were filled with adventures, snorkeling in crystal clear waters, exploring hidden coves, and hiking through lush jungles. In the evenings, they dined under the stars, the sound of the ocean providing a soothing soundtrack to their meals. But as much as they enjoyed the beauty of their surroundings, it was the connection they shared that made the honeymoon truly special. Without the distractions of everyday life, they were able to focus entirely on each other, deepening their bond in ways they hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they sat on the terrace, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, David turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with love. I know this wasn't the honeymoon we expected, David said, his voice soft. But I think it's been even better because we've faced this challenge together. Sarah smiled, leaning into him. I agree. I think it's brought us closer. David nodded, his gaze distant for a moment as he thought about his mother. I love my mom, but I realize now that we need to set boundaries. She's always been such a big part of my life, but I can't let that interfere with our marriage. Sarah squeezed his hand, appreciating his honesty. We'll figure it out together. I know it won't always be easy, but as long as we communicate and support each other, we'll be okay." David smiled, leaning in to kiss her. "I'm so glad I married you, Sarah." "I'm glad I married you too," Sarah replied, her heart full of love and contentment. The rest of their honeymoon passed in a blissful blur. They made memories that would last a lifetime, from romantic walks on the beach to late night swims under the moonlight. And with each passing day, Sarah felt more secure in their relationship, confident that they could face whatever challenges life threw their way. When it was time to return home, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. She was sad to leave the paradise they had found, but she was also eager to start their life together in earnest. As they boarded the plane back home, David wrapped his arm around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Upon returning, they were greeted by Margaret, who had spent the week reflecting on her actions. She welcomed them back with open arms, apologizing for her overstep and promising to give them the space they needed. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one, and it marked a new chapter in their relationship with her. Over time, Margaret learned to embrace her new role in their lives, becoming a supportive and loving mother-in-law. There were still moments when her overbearing nature threatened to resurface, but with open communication and mutual respect, they navigated those challenges together. Sarah and David's marriage grew stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of love, trust, and understanding. They knew that there would be more obstacles to face in the future, but they also knew that they would always have each other to lean on. Their honeymoon had indeed been a time to remember, not just for the beautiful memories they created, but for the important lessons they learned about setting boundaries, standing united as a couple, and prioritizing their relationship above all else. And as they moved forward, hand in hand, Sarah knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would always be able to weather the storm together. That, she realized, was the true foundation of their marriage.